During the 1930s in Germany, as the Third Reich gained power and Adolf Hitler's menacing shadows spread across the country, a pernicious seed was planted in the minds and hearts of the country's younger generation. This occurred concurrently with the emergence of the Third Reich. This was the Hitler Youth, a malignant institution whose main mission was to breed a new generation of National Socialists who would be unflinchingly faithful to the Führer and his repulsive philosophy. Its name derives from Adolf Hitler. But what sinister activities took place behind those imposing military ranks? And more importantly, what happened to the youngsters who were held captive by such a horrific apparatus? In this video, we are going to talk about the diabolical things Hitler Youth did during World War II. So before starting this video, please like this video and subscribe to this channel for our future updates. The Hitler Youth, the germination of hatred and its origins. The socio-political climate of Germany in the years immediately following World War I played a significant role in the origin and development of the Hitler Youth. The years immediately following the war were characterized by a sense of national shame and economic ruin, which was largely attributable to the strict stipulations of the Treaty of Versailles. This peace deal, which brought an end to the war, levied significant reparations on Germany, deprived the nation of regions, and left it in a state of deep instability. This milieu of hopelessness and resentment served as fertile ground for the growth of extremist ideologies that provided a route out of the upheaval that people were experiencing. The Treaty of Versailles helped to cultivate a sense of bitterness and indignation among the German public, which it did by sowing the seeds for future hatred. The conditions of the pact were considered to be humiliating and unjust, which contributed to the popular feeling that Germany had been betrayed by both its own leaders and the international world. This environment of unhappiness and frustration offered a breeding ground for radical ideologies that promised a restoration of national pride and power. This atmosphere of discontent and frustration produced a breeding ground for these beliefs. Among these political philosophies, Adolf Hitler's National Socialist German Workers' Party, which is more popularly referred to as the Nazi Party, was the one that gained traction. The charismatic leadership of Hitler and his ability to tap into the collective fury and desire for change resounded well with a sizable segment of Germany's populace. In the midst of Germany's economic difficulties, many people were searching for answers, and the Nazi Party's promises of economic recovery, restoration of German greatness, and the scapegoating of various groups as the source of Germany's ills struck a chord with many of these individuals. In light of these circumstances, Adolf Hitler came up with the concept of the Hitler Youth as a means of mobilizing the enthusiasm and idealism of the younger generation in support of the goals of the Nazi Party. The founding of the Jugendbund, which served as the NSDAP Youth League, in 1922 is considered to be the earliest documented instance of the organization. On the other hand, the organization underwent a transition that resulted in it becoming the entity that we recognize today on July 4, 1926, while Kurt Gruber was serving as its leader. Gruber's plan was to establish a system that would not only inculcate German youth with Nazi ideology, but also prepare them for future leadership roles within the Nazi Party and the nation as a whole. This was Gruber's vision for the apparatus that he wanted to establish. From the beginning of its existence, the Hitler Youth had two distinct objectives in mind. In the first place, it intended to indoctrinate younger people with the fundamental principles that underpinned the Nazi worldview. This included establishing a sense of nationalistic pride that was congruent with Nazi beliefs and fostering a sense of loyalty to the Führer, Adolf Hitler. Second, the organization worked to shape the minds of up-and-coming German leaders so that they would be unflinchingly devoted to the goal of the party. The Nazi Party's goal was to ensure that it would maintain its control over Germany's future by ingraining Nazi ideology into the minds of the country's youth. Indoctrination and leadership training to form loyal followers. The appointment of Baldur von Schirach as Reich Youth leader in 1931 made him one of the most important players in the development of the Hitler Youth. Through von Schirach's leadership, The group developed a highly regulated organizational structure and spread its influence across the entirety of Germany. Once upon a time, von Schirach made this proclamation: "The weak must be chipped away. I am looking for young men and ladies who are strong enough to endure discomfort. A young German needs to have the speed of a greyhound, the tenacity of leather, and the tenacity of Krupp steel." This phrase highlighted the philosophy of the Hitler Youth, as well as the goals that the organization strived to instill in its members. The Hitler Youth focused its activities and programs on numerous major areas, including physical fitness, paramilitary training, and ideological indoctrination, among others. Rallies and marches were a typical occurrence, and they were frequently accompanied by songs and speeches celebrating the Nazi Party. Members were encouraged to embrace the concept of the Volksgemeinschaft, which translates to the national community, and to regard themselves as part of a bigger whole, with their loyalty and allegiance owing first and foremost to Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party. Members were also taught to view themselves as contributing members of the greater whole. Controlling thoughts through propaganda and influence. The period of time known as Nazi Germany, which was characterized by the development of the rule of Adolf Hitler, was characterized by a troubling manipulation of thinking and ideology, most notably through the subversive influence of organizations such as the Hitler Youth. The Hitler Youth attempted to exert influence over the minds and actions of young Germans by disseminating carefully crafted propaganda, enforcing conformity, and working in conjunction with other organizations. The end goal was to transform these young people into ardent followers of the Nazi cause. This essay investigates the methods used by the Hitler Youth to establish authority over its members' personal lives, investigates the Hitler Youth's campaign against degenerate music, and analyzes the Hitler Youth's complicated relationship with the Catholic Church. Anecdotes from this time period offer a chilling peek into the extent to which the Hitler Youth attempted to exert control over the personal lives of its members. The brainwashing activities of the group were not restricted to demonstrations and speeches. Rather, they dove into the most personal and inconspicuous areas of everyday life. For instance, in the year 1934, the Hitler Youth began a fervent crusade against what they considered to be degenerate music, notably jazz and swing. This signaled the convergence of cultural control with political ideology, as at the time, jazz and swing were seen to be hostile to the alleged spirit of the Germanic people. The Hitler Youth was dedicated to influencing its members in every aspect of their lives, and one symbol of this devotion was the crusade against degenerate music. The organization's goal was to replace jazz and swing with music that was more in line with Nazi principles. Therefore, it condemned jazz and swing as corrupting influences. Members were strongly encouraged to not only criticize and destroy CDs related to this music, but also to report musicians and fans to the appropriate authorities. This tactic of employing music as a weapon for ideological indoctrination highlights the completeness with which the Hitler Youth invaded personal spheres and wielded influence over sensitive minds. The relationship that the Hitler Youth maintained with the Catholic Church is another fascinating aspect of the organization's past. In spite of the fact that the Church actively opposed the philosophy of the Nazi Party, there were occasions when the two organizations worked together. The purpose of this partnership was to increase one party's authority and influence on the younger generation. At the beginning of the 1930s, Catholic youth organizations were under intense pressure to combine their activities with those of the Hitler Youth. The Holy See and the German Reich signed a contract in 1933 called the Concordat, which formally united the two countries. In exchange for the Catholic Church's assistance to the Nazi regime, the Concordat provided it with a degree of freedom to operate independently. This alliance was a deliberate ploy on the side of both parties. The Nazi Party wanted to strengthen its influence over young minds, while the Church wanted to defend its interests in a political landscape that was unstable. Together, they formed this partnership. However, as the Nazi Party intensified its suppression of religious communities at the same time, the relationship between the Church and the Hitler Youth quickly deteriorated. Both the Church's moral stance and the regime's worsening atrocities contributed to a growing rift between the two institutions. The history of the Hitler Youth serves as a frightening reminder of the lengths to which authoritarian regimes might go in order to control the cognitive processes of their citizens and the individual lives they lead. The Nazi Party aimed to build an unthinking allegiance among the younger generation by utilizing propaganda operations that targeted cultural expression, such as the anti-music crusade, and collaborations with prominent institutions, such as the Catholic Church. It is impossible to overlook the connections between events that occurred in the past and present concerns about the spread of false information, radicalization, and the manipulation of young minds, contributing to the operation of the Nazi machine. Hitler's Youth in action. By gaining the support and allegiance of the young people of Germany, the Hitler Youth was an essential component in the ascent to power of the Nazi Party. They contributed to the establishment of an atmosphere that stifled criticism and ensured unwavering allegiance to the regime in power. Adolf Hitler famously stated that he alone, who owns the youth, gains the future. This goal was brought to fruition with the establishment of the Hitler Youth, which served as an effective instrument in the hands of the Nazi Party as it rose to power and attempted to change German society in its own image. During the 1930s, there was a meteoric rise in the number of people joining the Hitler Youth. By the time that the Second World War had begun in 1939, the organization could boast of having millions of members. This development was propelled not just by the popularity of its activities and ideas, but also by the fact that membership finally became required for all young people in Germany who were eligible for membership. The indoctrination of the younger generation proved to be a great asset to the Nazi government, as the members of this group went on to perform important roles in aiding the war effort and prolonging the atrocities of the Holocaust. The legacy of Hitler's youth movement, a troubled chapter in history. It is impossible to emphasize how much of an impact the Hitler Youth had on the lives of its participants. For many members of the group, the experiences they had while working for the organization would have a lasting impact on their perspective of the wider world. Some people would later come to regret their participation in the Holocaust and have a difficult time coming to grips with the horrors performed in the name of the Nazi Party. Others, though, would maintain their allegiance with unwavering consistency, even as the tide of the war shifted against Germany and evidence of the regime's atrocities became clearer. The Hitler Youth was not a simple, unified entity. Rather, it was a complicated structure with the goal of recruiting and indoctrinating young Germans from a wide variety of backgrounds. The organization consisted of a number of sub-branches, each of which catered to a certain demographic in terms of age and gender. Through the use of such an all-encompassing strategy, the Nazi Party was able to inculcate its beliefs in the younger generation, preparing them to become committed followers of the Third Reich and potential future leaders. The Jungvolk and the Deutsches Jungvolk. For members of the Hitler Youth organization, who were between the ages of 10 and 14, the Deutsches Jungvolk division served as an essential component of the organization. As the youngest members of the Hitler Youth, these teenagers were especially susceptible to persuasion and served as an essential demographic for the Nazi Party's program of ideological indoctrination and preparation for future leadership. At its core, the mission of the Deutsches Jungvolk division was to foster a sense of fraternity and belonging among the young members of the organization. This sense of camaraderie was painstakingly nurtured in order to instill allegiance not just to the organization, but to the broader principles of National Socialism as well. The division was able to build a sense of unity and coherence among the young boys it recruited by establishing ties among them. This helped to ensure that the youngsters would remain loyal to the Nazi cause. The education of the division's youthful recruits in the National Socialist ideals and tenets was of the utmost importance to the accomplishment of the division's purpose. This ideological indoctrination tried to shake their brains from a tender age, ensuring that the ideals of the Nazi Party were profoundly imprinted in their consciousness and ensuring that the Nazi Party principles were deeply ingrained in their consciousness. The malleability of these young minds was a significant aspect in the success of such indoctrination operations, and the activities of the division were carefully organized to reinforce these concepts in a way that was consistent with their goals. Although the Deutsches Jungvolk division did offer classes on academic topics such as history, geography, and racial theory, it is essential to keep in mind that these topics were taught through the lens of a highly skewed Nazi perspective, to ensure that young minds were exposed to a distorted version of reality that served the interests of the Nazi Party. Historical events, geographical notions, and even scientific theories were interpreted in a way that was in line with Nazi ideology. This was done in order to advance the goals of the party. The intellectual and emotional training of these young members was furthered by the fact that the events scheduled for them stretched beyond the confines of the classroom. Hiking and camping trips, for example, were not merely for the purpose of relaxation. Rather, they were chances to inculcate in participants a sense of the excitement and adventure that came along with being a part of the Nazi organization. Sporting activities and competitions, in addition to fostering physical health, also served to promote a competitive spirit and a sense of accomplishment, both of which were strongly tied to the principles of National Socialism. The motto of the organization, Für Volk und Vaterland, which translates to for the Führer, the people, and the Fatherland, summed up the attitude that was demanded of each and every member of the Deutsches Jungvolk division. This motto was not just a catchphrase. Rather, it was a depiction of the devotion and dedication that was required from these young guys. To be for the Führer was to pledge undying allegiance to Adolf Hitler, whilst to be for the people was to emphasize the collective spirit that was greater than individual concerns. Last but not least, the concept of being for the fatherland reflected the willingness to make sacrifices for the nation and the vision of its future that was fostered under the Nazi administration. The Hitler Jugend, also known as Hitler Youth proper. The Hitler Youth Division consisted of young men between the ages of 14 and 18. The focus moved here to further refining the skills and information obtained in the German Young People program. Training in paramilitary tactics and maintaining physical fitness were of the utmost importance. Members were required to take part in routine marches and drills and attend classes on topics such as first aid, reading maps, and safe weaponry handling. Older members had the opportunity to take on leadership roles as they climbed through the ranks, which provided them with invaluable experience in organizing and directing their younger counterparts. Girls, on the other hand, were allowed to become members of the Bund Deutscher Mädel, also known as the League of German Girls or BDM. The Jungmädel, which consisted of participants aged 10 to 14, was a part of the BDM. Nevertheless, the BDM proper consisted of participants aged 14 to 21. The purpose of the BDM was to educate young women for their potential roles as wives, mothers, and supporters of the Nazi dictatorship in the future. In addition to learning useful skills like sewing, cooking, and caring for children, they were inculcated with the values of the perfect German woman and the significance of maintaining racial purity. In addition to this, we placed a strong emphasis on maintaining a healthy body by encouraging members to participate in various sports and outdoor activities. Not only did the organization of the Hitler Youth, with its many different divisions, ranks, badges, and honors, provide indoctrination that was suitable for members' ages, but it also encouraged a sense of healthy competition and accomplishment among its participants. Young people were given awards for their participation in events and devotion to Nazi ideology as they went through the organization and moved up through the ranks. This system of rewards and recognition further strengthened the links between members and the organization, ensuring the members' continued devotion to the cause as well as their loyalty to the organization. The inheritance of darkness. Contemplations on Hitler's youth. The Hitler Youth had an incredible and incalculable influence on the lives of its participants. Their time spent working for the organization would have a lasting impact on both their perspectives of the wider world and the choices they made in it. Some would come to strongly regret their participation, and they would have a difficult time coming to terms with the fact that they had been complicit in the crimes done in the name of the Nazi Party. Others, despite the awful reality of war and the increasingly obvious crimes committed by the dictatorship, would maintain their steadfast support. The revelations of the horrors performed by the Hitler Youth during the Holocaust and other wartime atrocities tarnished their legacy as the war came to an end and Nazi Germany came closer and closer to defeat. The organization, which had once been proud of its goal to create a generation of committed adherents of Nazism, had become a symbol of manipulation, indoctrination, and the catastrophic effects of unbridled fanaticism in recent years. The Hitler Youth is a disturbing reminder of the ability for manipulation and control that radical ideologies can hold over the minds of the young. The Hitler Youth existed during the time of the Third Reich. Its narrative serves as a cautionary tale about the perils of fostering prejudice and unthinking obedience, drawing attention to the significance of critical thinking, education, and the maintenance of democratic ideals in the face of ideological extremism. The history of the Hitler Youth serves as a haunting testament to the insidious nature of ideological manipulation. As the Nazi regime seized control of young minds through systematic indoctrination, a generation was molded into fervent supporters of a sinister cause. The organization's objectives were carefully calibrated to foster loyalty, not just to a political party, but to a toxic ideology that championed the supremacy of a supposed master race and the ruthless suppression of dissent. The most chilling aspect of this history lies in the way the Hitler Youth harnessed the natural idealism and curiosity of youth, channeling it into a relentless engine of hatred. The organization was engineered to blur the lines between camaraderie and fanaticism, with young minds being conditioned to view obedience to the Führer as a sacred duty. By employing a range of manipulative techniques, from propaganda to punitive measures, the Nazi Party was able to stifle individual thought, replacing it with a collective obsession that ultimately culminated in unspeakable atrocities. The lessons derived from the Hitler Youth's dark legacy are acutely relevant today, serving as an urgent call to action. In a world teeming with ideologies that breed hatred and intolerance, it is our responsibility to recognize the warning signs and safeguard against the erosion of democracy and human rights. What do you think of our video? Let me know in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear from me again, be sure to hit that subscribe button before you go. Thanks for watching.